Welcome back, Commander. In this video, we're talking Dragon Age with Mark Darrah. So, without any further ado, hope you enjoy. So today's guest is a legend within the gaming development industry with a career spanning over 20 years, rising up the ranks from programmer to executive producer and director of award-winning games Dragon Age and Dragon Age 2. He's a BioWare veteran and now a successful YouTuber, Mr. Mark Darrah. Thank you for joining me.
It's nice to be here.
So for people that don't know you, if you could just give a brief overview of yourself and what it is that you do.
Yeah, so most recently I was the executive producer for the Dragon Age franchise, but I was at BioWare from 1997 until 2021. Started, as you said, as a programmer on Baldur's Gate 1, then a lead programmer, then this weird little jog around where I was lead programmer on Jade Empire, then I was the stream architect on Mass Effect and Jade Empire 2. Then I became lead programmer on Sonic Chronicles, took over Sonic Chronicles in a production role. That's when I moved into production. And then I've been in production ever since. I led Revolver, what Jade Empire 2 eventually turned into, and had to cancel that project, then took over Dragon Age and was the executive producer for Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age 2, Dragon Age Inquisition. Came on to Anthem to land that project in the last 16 months or so, and then came back to what's turning into Dragon Age 4, and then I resigned in late 2020, leaving in early 2021.
Wow, you've done you worked on quite a few games there. Do you have a particular favorite one out of the lot?
Yeah, so I think, I usually have three answers to that question. My favorite from the perspective of the team was Sonic Chronicles, because it's a small team, everyone really knew each other, that was really able to mesh really well. From the perspective of a project, I would say probably Dragon Age 2, because that was almost an insurmountable, impossible task that I think came together. The team really hit its stride. I think the game I'm most proud of is Dragon Age Inquisition. It is the one that most closely matches the thing that we wish to make.
All right, okay. With Dragon Age Origins, I mean, it was a new IP. I mean, the game is huge. It takes around about 50 to 80 hours plus to complete it. Is that something that you would normally? I mean, you packed a lot in there with like the lore and the whole game itself is quite a big game. Is that something that you'd normally do for a new IP?
I think you do want your first entry potentially to be a bit bigger. You have to establish a lot of lore, especially in an RPG. You've got a lot of world building to do. Dragon Age Origins is Dragon Age Origins is bigger than it probably should be. It's intimidatingly big, which isn't great for a new entry, because you don't want people to bounce off your game because they're like, oh, I don't know if I've got 80 hours to put into this thing I've never heard of before. But what happened with Dragon Age Origins is it's all kind of knit in this really tight knot. So cutting things is from that game, by the time I was taking over, it was basically impossible. I've spent a lot of time after Dragon Age Origins kind of thinking like, well, if we had wanted it to be 25% smaller, which is I think probably what it probably should be, is about 25% smaller than it is. How would you go about doing that? And the reality is there's not a lot of places you can cut without it actually kind of unraveling. The cuts are actually the cuts you can do. I mean, you can do things like, let's cut the deep roads, but that doesn't give you anything. It saves a couple hours of length, but it doesn't save you much from a development perspective, because you still have to make the same tile sets for Orzammar. You still have to make basically all the creatures. You can cut the Broodmother, I suppose. But that's it. So when you get in, say, and sort of do this mental exercise, the places you can cut, it's like deep things like, you could cut dwarves, the entire race, because that saves you the Orzammar tile set, the deep roads, all the creatures that are specific to that, like nugs and things. You could cut Dalish elves and the Dalish elf plot, but it really is at that level of cut. And I don't think I'm not saying that that's what should have been done to Dragon Age Origins, because I think that's pretty detrimental to the overall game. I think the game itself could have used to be a bit smaller, and certainly, you know, it could have been done a little bit more cheaply, but it's not really clear how you do that without damaging the product in the process.
Was there anything that you cut that you didn't really want to?
There was another origin story. There was the Avar for humans. It wasn't really that far along, but it would have been nice to have another human perspective. I think it does for our new IP in a human dominated society. It's a bit strange that we have only, I guess you have mages, but you only have a single representative of humans to sort of set the world building. So that's a bit weird.
Do you have a problem with like feature creep?
For sure. I mean, when Dragon Age Origins started development in 2002, so it went through a lot of iterations. It's changed its technology stack completely once. It became multiplayer and then became not multiplayer, back and forth. And what tends to happen with a story, at least the way that Bioware does stories, the story is written relatively early. It's not something that's glued on at the end. So as you work with and live with a story, there's a tendency to refine it, and it does tend to sort of stretch out and expand out. But then what happened when we were actually getting to the point of implementing it, you get things like the Mage Tower. So in the story, the Mage Tower, not the origin, but the actual part where you go to recruit the mages, the Mage Tower part was actually, as written, there's not really anything that happens there from a crit path perspective. You kind of come in, and then you get bonked into the fade, and that middle part, there's not really much there. So you got to the tower, and then you're like, but what? We're in this big giant nothing. So that had to be filled in to make it actually a rewarding experience. So that's feature creep that had to happen to make it full. But because the story as written, it was kind of almost skipping over that part. Like, you can't do what you would do in a novel when you're in a game. You can't just jump ahead the boring bit. You got to walk through the boring bit. So then you got to make that boring bit not boring.
That's understandable. In regards to like the story, David Gaiman wrote the first two novels that came out around about the same time as the game.
That's right.
Did you obviously have to work with him to make sure that you hadn't contradicted anything that he'd written in the books, or?
So I mean, he was the lead writer on Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2. So the only person that was responsible for maintaining that cohesion was him. One thing that the first novel does, and I think the second novel as well, is it's very respectful of canon. Well, the first one, because it actually takes place beforehand, so it doesn't really matter. The second, I can't remember what the second one is. Is that Stolen? No, that's not Stolen Throne, is it?
The first one's Stolen Throne. The second one's The Calling.
Oh yeah,
that's just before.
Just before.
Just before the
okay.
game.
Yeah, so both of those are right before. So basically, that's a David Gator has to argue with himself and make sure he doesn't violate his own self. One thing that's happened that is a little bit disappointing is that some of the future stuff was using what was sort of a default canon. So like, this one's got Wynn in it, but Wynn could be dead. This one's got
Alistair of King, or
Alistair is King, and I'm not I don't love that. I mean, granted, Dragon Age's potential world state is so nebulous that you pretty much remove 95% of characters from your toolbox if you don't do that. But I personally find that a little bit unfortunate that we were forced to do that.
Other interviews that you've done, that you normally have a different answer for this every time, but out of all the characters, which is your current favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I just started playing Dragon Age Origins again, but I haven't gotten very far. So I usually think that I'm kind of feeling like it's probably Cassandra at the moment, but in a weird way, I'm kind of thinking maybe I'm liking Dragon Age 2 Cassandra more than Dragon Age Inquisition Cassandra in this moment. I have a feeling that I might revert back to Liliana, who's been my answer in a lot of times in the past, once I get to Lothering in Dragon Age Origins, but we haven't got there yet, so we'll see.
I must admit, I'm quite fond of Morrigan and Alistair's banter that they've got going on.
Yeah, for sure.
Some brilliant writing there. Was there any ever talk about bringing back the Hero of Ferelden?
So it has been discussed on and off. The problem is that that's a very quantum character. You could be dead. But there has been conversations about probably never as a playable character, but bringing them back in the same way that Hawk shows up in Inquisition, to sort of have them to close that loop. It was discussed. I don't know if it will happen or not. I don't know where the story is for Dragon Age 4 at this point, but yeah, it's a conversation that's been had. The one thing is it's a silent character, so it's like, if you bring them back as a cameo, do you voice them? Do you not voice them and then explain why they don't talk? It's not really clear what the right path is there, and often when you end up in situations where all answers are going to make a significant percentage of people mad, then those things tend to not happen.
In regards to the development with Mass Effect, where you can save your game through into future games, and decisions you make, that happened with Dragon Age 1 and 2. Does that cause more headaches when you're actually developing the game? Do you always have to be thinking, well, this is something that we need to might have to pick up in the future, or how does that...
For sure. During Inquisition development, we had a presentation from an external developer from Fail Better Games, and one thing they talked about was the way they do storytelling is they call it campfires in the dark, which is basically you are here, but you don't know how, we don't know how you got here. We just know you got to this point. And in Dragon Age Origin, for sure, and to a lesser degree, Dragon Age 2, that's not the way that storytelling is done. It's just this giant web. And so the problem of bringing those choices forward is you've never condensed it down to, okay, well, you were pro mage because of all of these choices you made. We never actually sort of made that declaration. We just have you made these 97 choices. If we wanted to decide if you're pro mage, we had to, in the moment, go through all 97 and decide, which means to move from game to game, you have to bring all 97 across. Whereas to move to more of a campfires in the dark kind of way, you would say okay, you've decided to tell Cullen that he's right about his feelings towards mages. That means anti-mage goes up 1, pro mage goes down 1, and we'll keep that choice, but we won't necessarily migrate the you agreed with Cullen from game to game. We'll just migrate what was the Hero of Ferelden stance on mages from game to game. So as we've moved forward and moved more towards that kind of thinking, it's become a lot easier. You don't have to worry so much about what's going to happen in the future, because you can kind of make a more global impact of what this means and then deal with it in the future. The moving between different protagonists for the series also allows some degree of sort of fog of war on the choices, because it's okay, you made all these choices in Dragon Age Origins in Ferelden, but now you're not in Ferelden, you're in Kirkwall. So there's sort of a distance. So you care who's the king, but you don't necessarily care whether or not you saved Barkspawn.
Fair enough. See, with moving away from obviously moving to the Frostbite, you couldn't transfer stuff like over. Was that the main reason why the keep was developed? Did you have anything to do with the
so the big thing for the keep was one, to remove the platform dependency. So in Mass Effect or in Dragon Age Origins to Dragon Age 2, on the consoles, you had to move within the console. You can't move your stuff from a console to a PC or between different console ecosystems. Because Inquisition was essentially, not quite, but essentially a launch title for the next generation of consoles. It was on the older stuff, but the expectation was most people weren't going to buy it on the older thing, which is accurate. There needed to be a way to move from the even just from the old Xbox to the new Xbox, but certainly also from Sony to Microsoft and back and forth. So that was the impetus there. I do think that it also serves as a bit of a focusing lens, because when you start thinking about choices in terms of how will this be stored in the keep, then it simplifies that. It encourages that kind of campfires in the dark kind of thinking, where you're thinking about what is the long-term, what are the things I'm going to care about in the future? I'm not just going to save everything. I'm going to save things that might have a future impact. And I can save more than I need, but I don't want to save everything.
With Dragon Age 2, obviously it was a lot shorter development time than Dragon Age Origins. And was it always the plan to keep it in just in one city, or is that just because of the limited time that you had?
So when I came on to the Dragon Age franchise, it was to start the initial development on Dragon Age 2. At the time, that was something that looked more like Inquisition than like Dragon Age 2. Dragon Age 2 is kind of the thing that was created to plug the revenue hole caused by Star Wars: The Old Republic moving out again. So as long as Dragon Age 2 existed in this form, it was planned to be in a single city, because it was always planned to be something that we could accomplish in the time that we had.
Was Dragon Age 2 supposed to have multiplayer as well, or is that just it?
No multiplayer for Dragon Age 2. Origins, was because Origins was sort of envisioned as the spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate. It was sort of, and also kind of Neverwinter sort of smushed in the side. So it kind of was trying to be both Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter at the same time. So it was, it was multiplayer, but more of a campaign co-op, not a standalone thing, more like Inquisition has, or like Mass Effect has, like something where you could play through the critical path with other people. But it fell in and out a couple of times on Origins. I think once it was gone, there was never a conversation about that for Dragon Age 2 at all.
And with like Dragon Age 2 as well, there is a complete like shift from Origins to Dragon Age 2 in regards to like the combat, and it's more action focused. Was that intentional, or was that
for Dragon Age 2, the funny thing with Dragon Age 2 is the underlying combat systems are actually exactly the same as the ones in Origins. It's just the math that's different. So Dragon Age Origins has a perfectly symmetrical combat system. So if you pick up a bow and you shoot a Hurlock with it, and that Hurlock picks up a bow and shoots you with it, they do exactly the same amount of damage, which sounds really great, but is actually basically impossible to balance. Really late in Dragon Age Origins development, someone changed the rate of fire, I think, on bows, and basically unbalanced the entire game in an effort to make bows a little bit better for the player, but also made the bows better for every single enemy that shot you. Origins was definitely PC first, very first, because it wasn't even going to be on the consoles until after we got bought by EA. So Dragon Age 2 is aware of the existence of consoles much more than Origins is, and therefore the combat is trying to balance between the PC and the consoles, leading to more of an action style combat. But then it also swung that symmetry pendulum so far in the other direction that it's basically indecipherable. I mean, you can easily make a character in Dragon Age 2 that does 100,000 points of damage with a hit, which doesn't make any sense, because you only have a few hundred hit points. So the fact that you're doing 1,000 times as much damage as you have hit points isn't really comprehensible. You've separated the two. There is player attacking enemy, which is one entire system, and then enemy attacking player, which is another entire system, and that makes it very hard to understand. I think Inquisition does a better job of sort of balancing that a little bit. It's not perfectly symmetrical, but the asymmetry isn't so extreme. It's actually kind of what happened with Dungeons and Dragons as well. 3rd edition D&D is perfectly symmetrical. 4th edition D&D is incredibly asymmetrical, almost indecipherably so. And then 5th edition D&D sort of strikes a balance. It is asymmetrical, but not so extremely so.
Wonderful. So obviously you've now retired from BioWare, and you've got your own YouTube channel. How are you finding the change of? Is it a big change of pace for you, or is it?
Oh, it's definitely a big change of pace. I'm not doing YouTube full time, at least not yet. So that definitely, I've probably worked a minimum of a 60-hour week at BioWare for 15 years in a row. Definitely not working 60 hours a week anymore. But it's really good. For me, a lot of it is about providing what small amounts of knowledge I picked up over 23 years to people that are either interested about video games or are interested in video game development or work in the industry. Like, if we can make the industry a little bit better because someone comes up with an idea based on something stupid I say in a video, then that's worth it for me.
Yeah, you've got an awesome video on at the moment about the BioWare magic and the crunch.
Mm-hmm.
I'll link it at the end of the video for people to have a look at. But yeah, it's little things like that you don't really quite know as an outsider. Do you think that kind of mentality? Do you think that will eventually be stamped out, or is that part and parcel of game development?
I think it's going to change. I think when you look at movies, which are a lot more mature of a creative industry than video games, mature in terms of just being around longer and gone through several generations of movie makers. There's still a lot of terrible stuff that happens in movies, but it's a lot more, a lot of it is a lot more open. So you kind of know that if I'm signing up to be a key grip on this movie that's going to film in the Australian outback, that I'm going to have to live in the Australian outback for 6 months, and we're going to work 14-hour days for as long as we're out there. But I kind of know it going in, and there's sort of an expectation of what I'm going to get. I think in games, it's unspoken. So will it be gone? Will it be better? I think it's going to continue to get better, partially because the average age of a video game developer is going up. And as it goes up, I think people are a little bit more aware of their own limitations and a little bit more willing to push back on their own limitations. And I think as diversity increases, that also helps. It's not just I see someone who's 22 who looks like me, and I tell them, when I was your age, I worked 84 hours a week, you should too. I think as diversity increases, those stories have a lot less power, and that's a good thing.
Couple of questions, well, just a few questions from some of the viewers. That's okay. So Takes to Know Games would like to know, was there a point at the beginning of the Dragon Age series where you felt that you needed to map out the world of Dragon Age? So, like where Antiva was compared to Ferelden and Olay, like towards Winter, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so that's something that David Gator actually did. He did a lot of world building in that sort of 2002 to 2005 period. I think that that's an approach, and it's useful to kind of know. World building can get trapped in that process of trying to understand the entire world, even though you're only going to tell a story in Ferelden. Trying to map out the entire world. What Ferelden, or what Dragon Age Origins needed to know was, what does Ferelden look like? Needed to know where Orlais was, because that's relevant to the story. And kind of needed a vague idea of the rest of the world. Needed to know that, it was in the Southern Hemisphere, and therefore it's ice down there, and it's not ice this way. It needed a few things, didn't need everything else. It doesn't necessarily hurt to have everything else, as long as you're not getting trapped in the details. Revolver kind of got trapped in the details of trying to build out a world that it didn't really need, and then just kind of got, it started to eat its own tail.
Nerdy Dude would like to know what led to the decision of making Dragon Age not a trilogy like like Mass Effect, but instead making each game standalone while still implementing player choices?
So a big part of that was Dragon Age Origins was not intended exactly to have a sequel at all when it was originally conceived. So the story has the player character likely not surviving. So that's very problematic for moving forward. But also just the choicescape coming out of Dragon Age Origins, if you look at all those end screens, is so broad that it's almost impossible to make a sequel to that game without ignoring player choice, which we decided was just unacceptable to do.
I'm a Hot Dog asks, is Dragon Age in the same universe as Mass Effect?
So I don't believe the Dragon Age is in the same universe as Mass Effect. I mentioned this somewhere or other. I had a pitch to tie Mass Effect and Dragon Age together through the Fade, but there's not a planet in the Mass Effect universe where Dragon Age is occurring. I think if that was the case, that would really undermine the importance of everything in Dragon Age, because now it's sort of a thing that exists within this tiny thing that exists within the giant Mass Effect universe. I don't think that's an impact to Dragon Age you would want to have. But yes, I know that we do little Easter eggs like ogre heads in Mass Effect and Krogan heads and in Dragon Age. So maybe they're connected, but it's not a planet in the galaxy somewhere.
I did hear a rumor that that Dragon Age or Mass Effect could exist in one of Anthem's shaper.
Yeah, we did. That was also discussed as well, which like a potential way to knit them together would be to use the Shaper Storms or use Anthem as the kind of cross bridge. And again, I think that's the kind of connection you're going to want. You're going to want them connected through a relatively narrow tube to keep them independent, while allowing them to be connected in some way, if you're going to go that route.
Hollywood Guy asks, will we see any new types of allies, or is the Inquisitor playable in the next game? Obviously, you're not working on the next game.
I'm not working on the next game.
Yeah.
I imagine they will continue to go with a new protagonist. Will the Inquisitor show up? I don't know. I mean, they don't have an arm. So
A Dark Voice would like to know whether the dated Dragon Age graphics and combat could get the Mass Effect 1 treatment in the Legendary Edition, especially Dragon Age Origins, because that could be a spectacular game if it was improved.
So, I mean, I know that remaster for Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition has been discussed. It's a much different problem for Dragon Age than it is for Mass Effect. Mass Effect is built with Unreal. It's Unreal 4, I think, maybe 3, I can't remember. But it's still Unreal. So that actually opens up the possibility space of going out to a lot of external companies to help with the technological stuff and to unify it. Dragon Age is 2 different tech stacks. Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2 are 1, and then Inquisition is Frostbite. The easiest one to remaster would be Inquisition. In fact, if you install Dragon Age Inquisition now, push all the quality sliders all the way to the top, still kind of stands up to the new stuff. So you wouldn't necessarily need to do a huge amount of stuff to Inquisition, a little bit. Dragon Age Origins needs the most work. Some of those textures just don't exist at higher resolutions, but it's also a proprietary tech base. So you would need to find either a team within BioWare to do it, or you would need to find a talented porthouse that could climb into that ancient code base and drag it kicking and screaming into the future. One of my pitches in the early days of Dragon Age 4, when we were trying to convince EA to do a tool set for Dragon Age 4, was to make a tool set for Dragon Age 4, find a talented mod house, like a group that's doing mod, and essentially uplift them and turn them into a studio that could then rebuild Dragon Age Origins. But you know, Dragon Age Origins, of all of them, you also have to really think about remaster, remake, because if you do, I think if you do a remaster, it's like you update the graphics, you probably, that's all you do. You just kind of make it look prettier and you leave it alone. If you go any further, then you have to start looking at, you know, some of the themes in Origins have not necessarily aged amazingly. Once you start into the remake territory, you kind of have to ask the questions about that. And so then it potentially goes from, this is a lot of work, but it's mostly an art and programming job, to we're rebuilding this thing and reimagining every single thing. I don't really know that people really want that second thing, because, you know, they kind of want to feel what they felt when they played Dragon Age Origins. Combat's going to feel different. A lot of things are going to feel different if you go into a remake territory. So will it happen? I'm pretty sure that the conversation is happening again based upon the success of the Mass Effect trilogy. But I don't know if there's money for it.
Just finally, it's rumored that the Mass Effect trilogy, the next Mass Effect game, is going back onto the Unreal Engine. Do you think is that an easier engine to work with? Is that a better idea than using the Frostbite, or what would you?
So I have pretty controversial opinions about engines. My number one opinion is that you should use the technology stack that you already have and already understand and have already shipped a game with. That being said, even though it's Frostbite, Andromeda didn't use the tech stack that was built for Inquisition, and Anthem didn't use the tech stack that was built for Andromeda. If you're going to start over again every single time anyway, then Unreal is probably a bit easier than Frostbite. I know that Frostbite is used as a goblin about why everything that ever has gone wrong with any game at EA. I don't actually think that it is as responsible as people like to imagine. I think that if you start over again every single time, it's just as bad. Mass Effect 1, which was built on Unreal, was very hard because they were building up a tech stack. And so if you start over again every single time, it's going to be bad. So I don't know what's going to happen with Mass Effect. I don't know if that decision has been made or not at this point. If it had been my decision to make, I would not have chosen Unreal for Mass Effect. I would have chosen Dragon Age. I would have basically knit those two tech stacks together and forced them together. But that's not what had happened with all of the Frostbite games. They were all basically separate tech stacks. So there wasn't really much benefit gained from game to game to game.
Okay, I'm not going to keep you any longer. I know you're quite busy, so thank you very much for your time.
Yes, thank you.
Where can people find you? Where is the best?
So I'm Old Game Dev Advice on YouTube. I'm also on Twitter. If you search for, I'm Mark Darrah, because I can't change my Twitter handle or I lose my check mark. So yeah, check me out on YouTube or follow me on Twitter.
Great. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
I want to say a big thank you to Mark Darrah for taking his time out to chat with me. I could have chatted to him for hours. It's absolutely fantastic. And if you've heard the term Bioware magic or crunch and you're not quite sure what it is, he's got a great video which you can check out just here. A big thank you to Nerdadude, the supporters, and you for watching. I'll see you next time. Commander.